Hi, my name is Dan and I'm one of the DT evangelists here at Digital-Tutors. In this video, we're going to look at a question from one of our users, applecork, on how we can control where the bump map goes on our object. So to illustrate this, I have a badge that was created as part of the Creating Cartoon Characters in Maya course. And if I were to go ahead and render this out, we can see that we have a bump map applied to this, but it's not really lining up with our geometry very well. So I'm going to go ahead and save this so we can come back and compare later on. Let's take a look at the shading network that we have on here. So basically we have a simple material that has a bump map applied to it, and to drive the bump I'm actually using this file here. So if we were to take a look at what the file looks like, this is basically what is going to be creating our bump map. Now we could go in and adjust the actual vertex or our vertices for this mesh, and yeah, that definitely would be one way to control how our textures are applied, because when we move our vertices, it's going to also affect how our geometry looks, but we may not really want that since we only want to control where our textures are. So what we can do is actually use our UVs in order to do that. So I want to hop into the UV texture editor, come up to panels, panel and UV texture editor. So it's right there. And if I select this object, we can see the UVs that have been laid out. The primary ones I want to focus on here are this area here. So if I were to come in, right click and go to my face selection mode and select just a few of these faces, we can see here in our viewport where those are on our actual model. So we know that those are where our bump map is going to be applied. So that's really where we want to focus on. But if I were to adjust this, I'd have to render this out every time since we only see the bump map when we actually render it out. So a really quick way of being able to see this interactively is to actually come in and just temporarily to actually apply this bump map to the color channel. So I'm just going to middle click on my bump map file, go ahead and attach that to the color, so that way we can see how it looks here in the viewport. So now if I come back into my UV texture editor and select this, we can come in and start to move our UVs around, and we can see how that's going to affect here in our viewport. So we can see how that's being affected here in our viewport if we zoom in here. So we can come in and start to position this. We may actually want to kind of scale it down a little bit so it is fitting better on our geometry. If we get some areas where maybe it doesn't quite line up, we can actually come in and use the UV lattice tool, which is this icon up here, and we can come in and really kind of tweak how our texture is being applied to our geometry. So we can see we're just kind of tweaking this area up here. What I'm doing is I'm basically adjusting the lattice points here in the UV texture editor, but I'm watching here in the viewport to see how it's affecting my texture, so I can see how it's going to line up when I actually use the bump map. I'm pretty happy with this. It looks like this should work pretty well. We're right along the edge on most of these here. So let's come in and disconnect this from the color. So I'll come back into my hypershade here, double click on my material, go ahead and right click and break the connection to color. And we may need to come in and if we want a different color other than the gray, say if we wanted something like kind of a goldish color, we could come in and attach or throw that in there. But since we have our bump map applied, we can come in, I'll hit F to focus on it and render this out. And as we can see, our bump map is actually right along the edge here, whereas before it wasn't even close to the edge. So by going in and adjusting the UVs on our geometry, we're able to get a really fine level of control over where our bump maps are going to be placed on the geometry. Now, if you want to learn some more about how to use UVs, check out the Getting Started with UVs in Maya course.